Okay, so I'm just looking at what we need to do. Obviously, I've missed something small that our reCAPTCHA is not showing up. Just looked at my example from last year. It should look like this. So I'm just missing something small, which we'll figure out. So our reCAPTCHA should show up down here. So we've got our hidden input in our form with the name and ID of reCAPTCHA response. We're calling the reCAPTCHA API and passing in our site key. Again, we're passing in the site key with our action, just giving the action a name. We'll just check it again with their, so they call in their docs, G reCAPTCHA and reCAPTCHA.execute, which we've got. We'll try one more browser. I admit to being a bit puzzled. Okay, definitely not loading in any of these browsers. I'll have a look at one of my sites from last year just to see what we're missing. Okay, and so I may have to come back to this. I'm a little puzzled why this isn't working for us. Here's our lamp food. We've got our keys. I'm just going to try one with my different keys, just for fun. No, same issue. So I'm a little puzzled why this one loads, still running on my local server. Same code. Yeah, one works and one doesn't. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the rest of the code that goes on our save page, but I'll clean it up on my own time. I'm not sure why it's not loading. I assume it isn't loading for anybody else either. Correct? The G Recaptcha has an underline. It does, yes, because this object is in the, it's a good point, Megan. This object is rendered by the Recaptcha API. So the code editor doesn't recognize it, but the JavaScript is supposed to generate this object. That's a good question. And we can see that in the documentation, right? So right here, there's the call to the G Recaptcha ready and G Recaptcha execute. So it is to be expected that the code editor doesn't recognize that object. It's rendered by the API JavaScript. So fair question. But I can't explain why I have it working on this example, which is also running on my local host. So I'll figure that out. I will, but may as well do the code. So Jacob, it does load on yours. Okay, that's good. Won't load on any of my browsers. But we will write the code that goes on the save page. And I'll clean it up after, but at least you'll have most of the code that's here. So we want to add some validation to the server side. So here's our Recaptcha validation. I keep trying that, Chris. It's a good point. I've even tried it in different browsers. And that's why when I go to the private window, it should give me an uncached version. Right, on private. But I'm just not getting it even in Chrome or Edge. It's something small. Okay, if it's working for you guys, great, then we'll carry on. So there's the client side. Here's the server side interpreting the score. So we get a JSON object back with these values: a success, true or false, a score, error codes if there are any. So we want to verify the response. So it says, so we've got this hidden field here. Called Recaptcha response. We want to parse that because it's included in our form. So here's our hidden input. So the first thing we need to do is set up our API URL. So we need to send that response to the Google API. And the URL for this is google.com. I'll put it in the chat. Recaptcha API site verify. We then need our secret. So we can copy this from the Google console. So you can find your key here. I'm going to copy the secret key, paste it in. And then we've got a response that will come from that hidden field that we called Recaptcha response. So this is from API docs, from Google Console, from hidden input on form. So the only thing that will be different for each of you is everyone is going to have a different secret key value. So we'll call Recaptcha API and parse the result to check the bot score. So we can use this method called file get contents. So we're going to make a request to the Google API URL. And we're going to append on the secret and the response. And then we'll see what the JSON that we get back when we send this information to Google. And this will give us a JSON object. So this method gives us JSON, and we're going to convert this, decode it from JSON, it converts it into a string. Sorry, I guess it converts it into an array. So we want to, if it shows a bot, so the higher the score, the more likely it is that it's actually a person. If the score is 0, then Google's almost certain this is a bot. So we're going to check the score value in that array. If it's less than 5, we're going to print an error message and say OK is false. So there's all the server-side validation code. Sorry, trying to make it visible, the whole thing visible. I'll put it in the chat. Along with a placeholder for your secret key. So I'll try it out. I don't think this is going to run for me, but I'm going to try it. We'll see what happens. So I'll register. Whoops, okay. So I didn't pass, but I've got one little error here. The response does include a That should include a score. Have a score value. So why did this give me an error? Maybe it's... I'll try it this way. Because it converts our JSON object to an array. I'll try it this way. Okay, well, we'll read our reCAPTCHA response. I'm sorry, folks, for making a mess of this. Maybe I'll try true. Okay, I'm going to leave this and I will clean it up and record it later. I'm not going to waste your time. Any further on this. We're going to go and create our own API. Kind of like Spotify does. We want to be able to create a URL where we can render all our data in JSON format. So we'll make one page for this. I'll clean this up and record it later. So I'm going to make a folder in here. New directory called API. And we're going to make a page in here that's going to be a JSON API. So I'm going to right click and choose new PHP file, which I will call items. So even though we already have an items page in the root, we're going to have an items API page. This page is simply going to return JSON so we can get rid of all the HTML. And this will be a JSON API to fetch the current grocery list. So we're going to connect, set up the query, run the query, and fetch results as an array. We're going to convert the array to JSON and display the list in JSON format. So to connect, we're just going to require. Now our path is different because we're inside the API folder. So we've got to go up one level back to the root to include our database. We're going to select items.star and categories.name. We're going to join them based on the category ID. We'll set up our query as usual. We'll prepare it. We'll call fetch all, but this time we want to store it as an array. Controls the contents of the returned array. We need this format so we can convert it to JSON. Actually, we can just convert the array to JSON and display. We can do this in one step. We'll just echo out. We'll use the PHP JSON encode, which takes an array, converts it to JSON. We'll try this out. And then we can tweak it a bit too. So this should give us our full grocery list, I'm hoping, but in this format, in a JSON object. We'll try it out in just a second. And if it works, we're going to make a change to it so we can either get all the items, or if we pass an ID to the API, we can get a single item instead. So to try this out, if I go to lampfood/API/items, oops. Okay, we got JSON, but we got no data. We'll go and check our query here. The query was not executed. I thought I missed something. Thank you, Jacob. Would help if I called execute. Forgot that line. No point setting up the query if we're never going to run it. So be sure you add line 12. whoops, categories on bad syntax. One of those days. So now we get a JSON object with everything in the grocery list. Right, it shows us the category names. So we've built a simple API. So if we wanted to make our grocery list available to another application, they can use the API to fetch the data without them having direct access to our database. So we could build like a mobile app and consume this data. We could even set up our query that maybe we pass in, we also have the ability to pass in the name of a category. So I only want to see the items in the bakery. So we'll add, this will be the last thing we'll do, an optional category parameter. So maybe I'll say category equals null if we have a parameter called category, we'll read it So if we have a parameter, we're going to store it. So if our category is not null, we want to add a where clause to the query. Where So in this case, we're going to add a where clause on, and we need to fill that parameter. So we'll bind our category parameter as a string. It's 50 characters. So now we may get yeah, thanks, Ivan. We could use empty here, right? So if we have a parameter, URL parameter called category, we're going to populate that into our variable. And then we'll add a where clause and bind the parameter. I'll put this whole thing up on Pastebin and we can try it out. So with no parameter, we get the same list of data. But if I add a category, with bakery, right now my list is filtered. I only get those items. produce. So now my API, it may show everything, or it may show a subset of our list that's filtered based on the category. So if we publish this API online, like say Spotify API, then other applications can interact with it. And this is actually how, if you think back to the things you did in your Internet of Things class, this is largely how the Internet of Things works. We have these devices that capture data. They're enabled with HTTP, and they can submit that data, or that data can be read by other applications and devices using JSON. This is, for example, how you would have an app that lets you control your thermostat when you're not home. There's an API where you can make a JSON request and you would pass in the temperature. Your smart thermostat reads that temperature and updates. So we've both consumed APIs and also created an API that another application can consume for access to some of our data. They don't get all our data, they don't get the users, they don't get the categories, but they can read the items, either all the items or items in a particular category. So we're going to work with APIs much more through other courses in the program. And again, I apologize for not being sufficiently organized with Recaptcha. I will correct that and record that piece. I will push this up to GitHub now. Are there any questions before we go for today? Okay, so I will get this updated. I did give an idea of the exam at the beginning, Shazil. So I've already discussed that and it will be recorded. But respectfully, I'm not going to repeat it again. Fair enough. I will be sure to open the WebEx room by 12:50 on Monday. All right, everybody, have a good rest of your week. I'll see you all Monday afternoon, and I'll get my Recaptcha updated and finished up. You should have your marks by tomorrow for assignment 2. Thanks, Lee. You as well.